Thank you very much, Nandan, for joining us. It's an honor to have you here, and
Anytime.
welcome to our event. Thank you. Nandan Nilekani really needs no introduction, but just to set the context for what we're going to talk about later, I just want to say one or two things about his background and achievements. He is one of the co-founders and a non-executive chairman of Infosys, a global IT company with $20 billion in revenue. He is also the chief architect of India's digital transformation. His vision and execution have led to basically every Indian in the country having a verifiable digital identity. And this foundation has led about 700 million people, just under 2/3 of the country, to form new bank accounts, presumably first-time bank accounts, as well as about 500 million people on the back of the ease of verification of a digital identity to get credit cards, cell phones, when they otherwise might not have been able to do so easily. Nandan, on the basis of these foundations, you have spearheaded many transformations in the country: commerce, agriculture, and we, as well as other investors in this room, are investing actively in those transformations. Today, I wanted to focus on a future transformation that we at Ankur believe is very important, that of energy. And the reason we think this is the time to have this conversation is with continued rapid economic growth, increasing electricity usage, AI usage, EV adoption, and so forth. We expect that there'll be a huge surge in demand for electricity globally as well as in India. Could you please share with us your vision for how electricity will be generated, distributed, and consumed in the future?
Sure. Thank you, and thank you very much for having me here. I think you're right. Electricity is a very exciting space. It was a space which was going along for many years. I mean, all the technology standards of electricity were decided 120 years back in a battle between Edison and Tesla, whether we should have AC or DC. And once that got settled, we had AC for 120 years. But today we are at a very exciting time for multiple reasons. One is the grid itself is going through huge transformation with the need to have much more renewable energy on the grid. So we have a lot more wind and solar generation on the grid. They in turn create volatile energy flows, so they need to be balanced out, so you have grid-scale batteries coming and so on. But what's truly exciting is what's happening on the edge grid, what's happening outside or behind the meter, as they say, and which is that historically energy was generated by large producers, distributed by utilities, and consumers are just buying from the grid, monthly bill, same price, and so on. But today we are in a world where every home could potentially have a rooftop solar, that means every home becomes a generator of electricity. Every home can have a electric car, which means they have an EV battery, which means they have storage capability. And the ability of, therefore, when we go to a world where you have millions of small, independent families or homes or even small businesses being able to generate electricity, store it, buy it, sell it, etc., completely changes how we think about that, think about the future of electricity. So what the digital energy grid is a way, it's a protocol to unify all these disparate entities who are all in the energy space and see by creating a common way for them to transact with each other, talk to each other, whether they can, participate better in the energy revolution. That's in essence what is happening, and for that we have proposed an architecture for that. But I can get into more details as we go along.
Could you tell us about the architecture?
So the idea is that it's a set of protocols of how to talk to each other when people buy and sell electricity and so on. So what's happening is in the old model you had a few large energy transactions, right? I mean you bought bulk or you bought by the month. Now when you have such high variation in price based on time of day, so if you have a huge amount of solar on your grid, then you have excess capacity in the daytime, so you sell cheaply, and then at night it's expensive because you don't have solar capacity and so on. So how do you deal with these variations of price? So you need to be able to have different prices, real-time price changes happening. Then you want to be able to both buy and sell. So if I'm a home, I want to buy power when it's cheap on the grid and do things with it, and then maybe even store it when I buy it from the grid, and then when the grid is willing to pay you more, you can sell it back to the grid. So then I can make money from having storage with me. But how do you make this happen at scale? How do you allow billions of people to this thing? You need a way to talk to each other. So think of how it is with the internet. Internet, we take it for granted. So you move from New York to Bangalore, go to the hotel room, connect your laptop, and your email gets downloaded or whatever. So why is that happening? Because below the hood, there's a lot of protocols that make that possible. TCP/IP, SMTP for emails, HTML for websites. So there were actually protocols built in the internet which made it possible for us to use it in effective ways. So energy, or at least the new world of distributed energy, needs a similar language of common communication. So that's what DEG is.
What do you need to change in the existing grid, specifically in India, for the different entities on the grid to be able to speak in this new language of communication?
To create any digital system, you need to be able to, it should be trusted, it should be able to discover where an asset or a source is. You need machine-readable data to flow and all that. So if you look at any things we have done, UPI or whatever, they all have that capability. You can identify a person or identify a bank account. You know that the money is coming from that bank account. You know that authentication request is coming from that individual. So this trustability and all is very important. So in the world of energy, you're going to have many new points, right? You're going to have the rooftop solar, which has some kind of digital connectivity, or the battery. Can they all have unique identities in the electricity grid? Can you make sure that when they send data, you know it's from that source? Because there's a huge risk in the digital grid that there'll be a lot of spoofing, malware, cyber attacks. So to make sure that all the data is coming from a genuine participant. And how do you make sure that the system gives machine-readable data? Now, this is again important because people keep saying, we shouldn't worry about AI consuming power because AI will then make the power more efficient. Nobody answered how are they going to make it more efficient. So the way it's going to become more efficient is by harnessing the data on the grid. To harness data on the grid, you need machine-readable data flowing around so that then you can apply AI to it. So this whole application of AI to making electricity more efficient requires underlying data to make it happen. To have underlying trustable data, you need every device to be able to send authentic data. So there's a lot of housekeeping you have to do at a device level to even get to where you want on AI, for example. So those are all prerequisites that you have to do. And you don't have to do everything in one day. I mean, you can do it over time and enable each person to come on board.
This housekeeping that you speak about, right, which is to allow each device on the grid to have its own identity and to make sure that the data that it is sending is trusted and cannot be tampered with and so forth. Is that something that requires physical infrastructure, or is that something where you have information layer or a protocol layer sitting on top of what exists?
Yeah, see, electricity is different from payments. Payments is only digital stuff. And therefore, it's simple. In the world of electricity, there's the actual movement of electrons. And that's obviously the main thing you do. You sell, buy, electricity moves, and there's a whole ecosystem of grid, transformers, smart meters. There's all these things there. So that's required. That's the heart of it. But if that does not have a digital coordination layer on top, you'll just end up with a lot of siloed, power production. So you need this digital layer on top to act as a coordination layer of all this. That's what we are proposing. And to have a digital coordination layer, you need everyone to talk the same language. And that's really what it is.
So, you mentioned that electrons are physical entities, right? And so the matching of demand and supply has to be done live.
Yeah.
And so that's where the coordination can
So to have coordination, you need a way to talk to each other, across the world, right?
Right. So, in addition to the coordination, which is done with the, with the different devices speaking the same language, another problem with the physicality of electrons is that each wire has a limited capacity, right? And so you can have grid congestion, and historically there have been ways to deal with that. How do you propose some of these physical constraints of the grid to be addressed with this talking to each other?
So the physical constraints don't go away.
Right.
But having this digital layer of movement of information and observability of that information allows you to better manage, physical world constraints. For example, let's say that in many countries now there's a lot of rooftop solar, and it's a very hot day. Everybody generates power, and then then you have policies for net metering where you can sell that power back to the grid. So suddenly the grid gets this massive surge of electricity from all these guys who have rooftop solar who want to make a bit of money. Now, if you don't have a way, if you don't know what's happening, you're going to get hit by this. And that's what happens, by the way, in many grids, that this surge of energy which comes from a hot day, they're not able to cope because they don't know where it's coming from, how much is coming. And then the frequencies go haywire on the grid and so on. So all kinds of issues happen. So if you can now put this information layer, then at least we'll know how much energy is coming from which guy, how much is going to come and so on. So you can now think you have better resilience to deal with this. It's not, it doesn't deal with the problem, but the information allows you to deal with the problem better.
Speaking of renewables, one of the big advantages that India has is that the cost of solar power is among the cheapest in India. And we also have, from the government policy perspective, the 10 million rooftop solar plan by 2027. And it's much faster to connect solar. You don't have to do the energy flow analysis and so forth. So in about a few weeks, you can get the solar power connected. What do you see as the scope for renewables? Do you think India will leapfrog the situation that other countries have found themselves in if you combine the advantage of solar power in India with some of what you have outlined in terms of the information coordination?
Yeah, so I think in terms of, India has benefits in solar, but so do many other countries. If we look at the global data now, with the massive drop in prices of panels and the Chinese, especially, for example, you look at the data from Africa. Every country in Africa is importing massive number of panels. So I think this is a global phenomenon where you will have, thousands of people importing and putting in panels. Now, there are two ways you can think about this. One is you can think of grid scale solar, or you can think of rooftop solar. So both are applicable. So if you look at a massive power plant, Adani has a 30 gigawatt solar plant coming up in Gujarat. That's just massive single producer of electricity, which they'll put on the grid through the transmission. So that's one way of thinking about it. But the other is that the rooftop solar, where 10 million homes will have a panel on top. So I don't think India is particularly unique in that aspect, that this massive growth of distributed solar energy. Where we have a chance is if we can then put this software or digital overlay on top of that to coordinate this better, we can come up with a whole set of new applications and use cases which we could not have done without this digital layer. And it'll also help in optimizing our assets, because if you're able to harness this capacity, then it may reduce the need to overload capacity on the grid. So it has, capital efficiency benefits.
We're all investors, many investors in this room, and we follow the money, and the electrons may not always follow the money. So who pays and who gains? Because any mainstream application will have to go through the distribution grid. And there may be applications that are peer-to-peer, and we'd love to hear more about sort of the new age applications. But for any mainstream application that goes through the grid, how do you think of the alignment of the infrastructure that has to be invested and the entity that benefits from that infrastructure being invested?
No, there'll be a lot of investment opportunities that will come about. So let me think about 4 or 5 use cases. The first is the need to create a truly interoperable charging network. Now, what is happening today is that everybody invests capital and sets up a charging network. And everyone has their own app for their charging network, which is not practical as a user. If I have an EV car, and there are 5 charging networks in my town, each of them has 100 charging points, and each has a different app. I can't keep toggling between 5 apps to find out. So ideally, I should be able to just look up in one place and look up all the 500 charging points. Which ones are the closest to me? Which ones have a slot? Because slots are a big problem in this game, because the car goes and plonks itself there for 1 hour, then nobody else can go. Or I want to have green power. So then there'll be some of these guys will be selling only green power. So there are many things. So how do you make all this interoperable? Can only be done with a DEG kind of a protocol, so that all the various charging networks, all the aggregators then connect into this, and then anyone can have a consumer app from where he can look up all the charging points and make an appointment and go and get his charging done. This also optimizes the asset utilization. So if I invest 100 charging stations, I now have every potential EV able to discover my charging station, which is not true if it's all siloed stuff. So I think of UPI, right? Why did UPI, many reasons why UPI took off, but one of the reasons it took off for merchants was we came out with a single interoperable QR code. So NPCI came out with a single, which is very important. People have that to say, what are you guys doing? So what that does is that if I stick a QR code on my small shop, any UPI app can make a payment. I don't care whether it's Bheem or PhonePe or Google Pay or XYZ. So interoperability is very important. So DEG or the protocols of DEG will allow you to create one gigantic interoperable grid. So I can now invest, and I know that my charging network, the whole EV world can use. So that's one example. But many people can build those apps, and just like UPI apps compete with each other, charging apps can compete with each other. And there's just one, many examples. This is one.
Could I ask for an example that affects the mainstream Indian, right? I mean, the EV charging is, and just to push a bit, that's...
Even two-wheelers also, so it's not just,
right.
not just cars, it can be two-wheelers also.
Right.
But you're right, you're saying people have to afford these things.
Well, and also it's something that's a new thing that is coming about. But if you think of the existing grid and all of the problems that people face in the existing grid, could you give us some examples of how the digital energy grid or the UEI will solve a sort of standard plain vanilla problem faced by everyone?
Again, one is, obviously, for many people, this will be the distributed energy will be the primary source of power, because they're not getting regular power from the grid and so on. So that's one thing. Now, you can also use DEG to streamline the installation and adoption of this. So if you can, if you're going to install 10 million, then everybody should be able to install it in a matter of a day or two. How do you make sure that happens, right? You have to, who is the household? Do they have access to subsidies? If they have access to subsidies, can we build an architecture where when they install it, the subsidy automatically comes into the bank account like we do for other subsidies? If the household wants to borrow a loan, is a way we can build a standard architecture to get collateralize that whatever asset you have bought to get access to loan. How do you do the paperwork with multiple ministries in one shot? So can you reduce the cost and time of onboarding of a solar panel at a home from weeks to 1 day or 1 hour? That changes the whole thing. It allows people and provides a financial backing for that. So that changes the whole game and allows. I mean, we did the same thing in banking. We said, how do you do KYC to open a billion bank accounts? So something similar. So that's an example where the common household can actually benefit from that. Then how do you create? How do you enable peer-to-peer transactions? If you have surplus energy in your house, can I sell it to my neighbor? So I don't have to sell it to the grid, I can sell it to my neighbor. So that's again something which DG will enable. And by the way, today in UP, there are already regulations out for peer-to-peer trading between two parties, and it's being implemented. Wow. I mean, and the UP regulator has come out with very good regulations. And other states are observing those regulations and seeing. So many startups are coming to facilitate peer-to-peer trading between two people, or somebody operates like a small mini grid in his or her area and sells to others through this stuff. So that's again can change economics for many people. A very important thing is demand flexibility. So if I'm a utility, I want to make sure that my power demand is normalized through the day. Because as I said, when I have a lot of power, there's not enough buyers for it. So the power prices fall. If you look at what's happening in places like California and Texas, for many parts of the day, the power costs are negative. I mean, because there's more generation than capacity to absorb. And then at night when there's no power, or the wind is still, or there's no solar, then prices are high. So what a utility would like to do is use this digital energy grid to reduce shift the demand. So you can then offer a package where you can tell people who own cars that you can actually charge your car during the day and we'll give you a much better price. And then if all the charge gets charged in the daytime when it's parked in the office rather than at night when it's parked at home, then the owner of the car gets cheaper power. And for the utility, they're able to sell power in the daytime, which was otherwise surplus. So that you can actually now use this technology to shift your demand. So demand flexibility is only possible. You can't do that without knowing what's on the other side. You have to know how many batteries are there, how many rooftops are there. So, all this requires information. So, so demand flexibility is another example. And another big example is the concept of cloud storage. And we talked about many of your firms, many of your companies are building grid-scale batteries and other batteries. Now, if you can create a way for someone to aggregate these batteries and offer that as a cloud storage to either to a company or to the grid, doesn't matter, it could be any customer, then when there is extra power, I will hire this cloud storage and ship my power to this cloud storage guy who will store it for me. And then when I need that, I can pull from there. And then that becomes a business model for the guy owning the cloud. And that could be many small people. So you could have 1 million entrepreneurs, all of whom will invest in one battery. But that battery is on the grid. And that battery can be offered. It's like the PCO of the battery business. So that battery can be offered to store power when somebody needs it and pull from there. And you can take a transaction fee for that. So there are all kinds of possibilities.
You mentioned batteries in the cloud storage, and there are many different standards for batteries, and new ones are emerging in terms of there are many different types of batteries. Technologies for batteries, and new ones are emerging by the day to reduce reliance on lithium and so forth. How difficult will it be for batteries of different profiles,
No problem.
different standards to fit in?
This has nothing to do with what the battery is made of. The battery may be made of lithium-free, like your guy is doing. It could be vanadium, liquid batteries, molten iron. I don't care what it is. And battery technology will keep improving and better technology will come. They will use less, rare earths. All that that's a completely different innovation. But as long as that battery has a digital interface, one is the physical interface, and that will be standardized in how the battery connects to the grid and then there's a digital interface. If these two are standardized, then what happens in the battery is technology or chemistry is not relevant at this point. Different batteries will offer different capability. You just connect it into the grid and then use it as it's appropriate.
You've spoken before about how you need to have various people acting in concert in order to make any large-scale change happen. And for the digital energy grid and transaction layer especially, you have the UEI Alliance, the Unified Electricity Interchange Alliance. Could you speak a bit more about that? And
Yeah.
I believe it has 75 members currently. What is the role of different stakeholders as this transition happens?
Yeah, so this is a major shift, right? I mean, it's not non-trivial. So I think there are many things happening. One is, of course, we have the UEI Alliance, which is 75 members, including large incumbent utility providers as well as startups. And all are committed to creating a way of making this happen. And we have these various use cases like peer-to-peer trading, demand flexibility, cloud storage, interoperable charging. These are all different possible uses of that. So that's one thing. But the good news also is that the Indian government and the Ministry of Power has come out with a goal to have an India energy stack, which is on these principles. And I happen to be the mentor of that group. And we are coming out with what should be the energy stack so that everybody can participate, both big grid players as well as small startups. So the energy stack was announced a few months back, and that's the government push. Then the heavy industries ministry is looking at creating an interoperable charging network. So different actors, and then many of the big utility companies are saying, how do I use this to do demand flexibility? So I think different actors, which is utility companies or solarization companies are saying, how do I speeden up my business? So if I'm a business that is promoting solar, if I can reduce friction to adoption, then I'll grow much faster. So people are looking at that. So everybody is looking at it from where is it useful to them? And what we do is we orchestrate this whole thing so that finally we get to where you want to go.
Thank you. I'm going to ask one more question and then open it up to the audience for questions.
Sure.
You've spelt out a vision that's very compelling of orchestrating and thereby taking away a lot of the inefficiencies that exist and also opening up many new applications. This is a broader question about you. You've gone against the grain and convinced people of a vision that has often been very different from their deeply held beliefs. So going back to the 80s and 90s, you were able to convince people that Infosys was about quality, even if it meant a cost savings. And with UPI and Aadhaar, you've been able to convince people of a vision that only a few could grasp of the power and dignity of a digitally verifiable identity. Many people in this room are trying to do that. They have many cutting-edge ideas that others don't understand their vision. Could you tell me how you do this? How are you able to change people's minds away from deeply held beliefs to something where you can see clearly the vision and not everyone can?
Well, I mean, it's not easy, but
to say
I
the
think
least.
The thing is, first I have to believe it myself, because I have to convince myself that this is possible, it's doable, and it's beneficial. So unless I'm convinced, then obviously I can't evangelize it, right? So so I need to get convinced. I also look for I operate in the if you do a 2x2 quadrant, you can have low impact, high impact, and you can have low friction, high friction. So I operate in the high impact, low friction quadrant.
Okay.
So obviously, I don't want to be in low impact quadrants. And there are many things which are high impact but also high friction. So when you have a high friction quadrant, then it takes more time is spent in convincing people and fighting with them than doing what you want to do. So I avoid those, you know. Fixing cities, for example. I don't try to fix cities. I've tried and I know how much friction there is. So I work in this high impact, low friction, where there's an idea which I can see the future, but not enough people can see it, or not enough people care enough about it to oppose it. You know? And then we keep working at it, play the long game, and one day it happens.
We thank Nandan for outlining the principles behind this, the idea of having information and each element of the grid being able to talk to the other elements in a clear way, in a non-tamperable way, so that you can coordinate across the grid to allow for greater efficiency, as well as many of the new applications that are very exciting. We're glad to know that you are orchestrating things with the government and with other stakeholders. And we're also, most importantly, very glad to know that there are so many business opportunities. All of us here are keen to explore the new business opportunities. And we look forward to the next 10 years
Thank you.
unfolding. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.